you everybody who has joined us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So today is the second, the frontier powered by the webinar series that we have put together to bring together those who have collaborated with us on the Edge Research reports on the very unsettled topics dealing with technology overall, but basically technology that impacts the new mobility. Today, we have two incredible speakers, but we also have two colleagues that are in the background, Matt Wazowski that you just saw, and also Alicia Chamberlain, who is going to be monitoring the comments on the chat. So we have Aharon David and Gloria D'Anna. Aharon talks with us from Israel and Gloria from Detroit, Michigan. I'll ask you please to introduce yourselves. Gloria, if you'd like to start.
Oh, sounds great. I'm Gloria D'Anna. I've done two publications with SAE. One was Cybersecurity for Commercial Vehicles, which is really class 4 through 8. That was published in 2019 before a lot of this all happened in the commercial vehicle space. And then I just published another book called Cybersecurity for Entrepreneurs, which not only is for entrepreneurs, but also sort of like the everyday person as to what they need for cybersecurity. So I co-chair SAE G-32, which is Cyber Physical Systems. If my cat joins us, by the way, his name is Odin. He might come here. And so Cyber Physical Systems really launched off of my first book. We had two chapters that we put on steroids. One was written by the Department of Energy with regards to EV charging and how it affected the grid. And the second was written by what became the SAE G-32 Leadership Committee, which was on Cyber Physical Systems. So we took those two. They're steroids, they're G-32, and now we're looking at cyber physical systems across all industrial verticals. Oh, and then for fun, I work at Ford. I work on RF systems, particularly antennas for future connectivity on vehicles. With the thought, actually in the past, prior to joining Ford, that RF and cyber were going to merge and get worse. I had reached out to the aerospace community quite some time ago. Because they're very good at communications, including high orbit and low orbit satellites that I was playing with prior to joining Ford. And so, yeah, it's happening. So, you know, the goal is how do you hack fleets? How do you hack all sorts of things through RF, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, et cetera.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Now let's hear Aharon. Aharon, now there is a lot to talk.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Aharon David, as you said, from Israel, just 7 time zones east of Eastern. And I'm an aerospace engineer. I spent the last 4 decades mostly in avionics and aerospace. I led some major projects in the Israeli Air Force for avionics, Israeli Defense Ministry for national anti-ballistic missiles defense. Then I went into civilian aviation in the last few decades. And recently I went into, not so recently, in the last few years, into cybersecurity. And I've already done 3 actually Edge reports for you, Monica. The first 2 were about cybersecurity. Yes. The first one was pure aircraft airworthiness. The next one was airports, which started this ordeal of air and ground and combined cybersecurity. And in between, I'm working with Gloria at G-32. We're going to meet again for a leadership discussion 2 hours after we're done here. And I'm teaching DO-326 cybersecurity for aerospace, for SAE and in general. And I teach some other things for SAE, and that's about it. We don't have enough time to keep talking about that. Back to you, Monica.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
So we'll be talking about some interesting things today, mainly where ground and aero connect when it comes to cybersecurity. Aaron, we'll start with you. You have been involved with aerospace avionics for the past 4 decades. And also in the past few years, you got involved little by little and now almost full time into cybersecurity. Airports seem to be of particular interest to you. Why is that? And how did it start?
It started when after the first EDGE report that was pure airworthiness aircraft for you. I said, well, let's broaden it up a little bit, and then I started talking to all sorts of the most spectacular contributors. Gloria being one of them, of course. And then it was like a rabbit hole. Airports are like small cities, some of them not so small. And they are not just Internet of Things, they're Internet of everything. From aircraft to ground vehicles to information systems to passengers to bystanders, everything. Airports have almost everything, and they're chaotic. And chaos is interesting, always. And cybersecurity, our adversaries, who typically live in the shades, would probably have a field day with the airport's chaos. And this is how it started. And then I was fascinated by the disorder, the chaotic manners of the security itself. That is not, there's no big picture in there. This is what started this interest. And from then we went on, and I had some fascinating discussions with Gloria, even out of G-32 that we're both members of. And maybe we'll let her take it from here.
Thanks, Aaron. So,
Yes, thank you.
So let me just add to that. So prior to joining Ford, I was working in the telecommunications space with experts actually in satellites, high orbit and low orbit. And then we also looked at communications on the tarmac and what that meant. And we actually came up with solutions for that. And as we were coming up with solutions to actually secure airports from things like hurricanes or maybe gunshots, we basically started looking at the different standards on airports. And so it was very interesting as to what was standardized and what was not, and what happens if you're secure or you're not secure for hurricanes. So I started there. Then what happens is as you start, I love airports as a city because it's something that becomes very tangible. And I love drawing boundary diagrams around things as to what it means. So if you're in your airplane, you typically, and Aaron and I said, we're not going to talk about the airplanes here. We're going to talk about the airport. So the airplane has all sorts of standards, but the airplane's coming in, right? And when the airplane comes in, it will download all sorts of messages off the airplane for maintenance, et cetera. But then you've got people on the ground, okay, and what do they do as they secure that or they don't secure that? Well, what happens as your technology change for the vehicles that service the airplanes on the tarmac? What happens there? And what happens as they change? Some of them are standardized vehicles that are upfitted. Upfitting is always interesting from a cyber standpoint because it's not standardized. And then you also have very specialized vehicles. So, for example, if you really wanted to, you could automate a vehicle that takes an airplane out to the tarmac so you don't have someone driving it out there. But so there's all sorts of changes that are going to happen on the tarmac. Well, what happens with those vehicles need to have over-the-air updates for their cybersecurity updates? Well, where do they go do that? You take them into a hangar or not a hangar, a building that then is allowed to have RF come into that space specifically for the space. You got to think about that. So then we talked about what happens as, let's say, an automated vehicle that comes in as a bus system into an airport? Well, what type of physical security are you going to set up? And Aaron and I have gone off on all sorts of discussions on physical security and how you look at the people who work at the airport, let alone all the things we're familiar with from a TSA standpoint. But there's lots of aspects between people. Who are they? Who are they really? What access do they have? What IoT aspect do they have? You now can put little trackers on your luggage. I don't, but you can put little trackers on your luggage. I never put my luggage underneath. Personally, I think it gets lost. I always have hand-carried luggage, right? So you go through all these little details. And if you start to watch when you're actually in an airport and what you're doing as a passenger and what you can and can't do, it's fascinating. If you put your cyber hat on, or I would say a person who thinks very outside the box hat on, you start to see the glitches in the system. And so what we're trying to do, and I think Aaron's Edge report is fascinating, by the way. So I recommend anybody should get a hold of it, because it really makes you think, not just an airport, but it really makes you think about a city. So what happens with infrastructure? What happens with water? What happens with HVAC systems? What happens if you lose the water in your airport, which some of them have? You can't flush toilets, you can't wash hands. I mean, it becomes sort of a hygiene mess. So there's all sorts of things in that report that are just great nuggets as you start to look at things that are even complicated, like a city. And then, as we also discuss offhand, airports aren't standardized. And you have so many different groups that are involved in the airport, including the politics of it all. So it becomes a very complex microcosm. And so when you start to try to look at it from a cyber standpoint, you've got to really put a SAE G-32 hat on that says, how do you deal with all these aspects? And where are the risks? And who actually does this? Who actually looks at this and says, from a Detroit airport, I really want to look at this. Well, who actually does that? Is it DOT? Is it FCC? Who is it as we try to actually solve a very complex problem?
Thank you, Gloria. I also would like you, if you could, talk about the 2 books that you have published with SAE on cybersecurity.
Okay, so this one is, cybersecurity for commercial vehicles. Really looked at class 4 through 8. I tapped, and this is before we really started talking about commercial vehicles, I tapped into some very interesting people to write some chapters for this. And so one of the top guys who is the red team expert, who leads the red teams that actually win all the competitions, he actually wrote chapter 2, which is Should We Be Paranoid? And as I say, within 8,000 words, you will be paranoid. It's just a different way of looking at the world. And then I tapped into, in fact, I even had Governor Snyder at the time write a piece for this, as well as people who are working for the state of Michigan. But it's a fascinating piece. It's a complex piece. I even republished something by the American Trucking Association, which is, as trucks go, so America goes. And you saw this during COVID, that if you end up really having issues with trucks, your economy for the U.S. actually doesn't do well. So prior to that, it was SAE actually urging me to do something. I did a presentation up in Montreal. And afterwards, I had a lot of government people come up to me after that. But the presentation that we actually did, and I did it with a really talented hacker as well, actually went to the New York and New Jersey Crimes Task Force. And that's really where commercial vehicles started to be put on the map. So the next one that we did, I took the SAE G-32 gurus that I work with because they're fun. And we did cybersecurity for entrepreneurs. And this is like, if you're starting up a business, what should you know so that you don't crash your business and do basics? So we created somebody called Peter the Salesman. So he's a cartoon character. And he always has a bad cyber day. And he showed up in an IEEE paper several years ago. And I almost killed him off due to a cyber event. And my co-writer said, "You cannot kill off Peter." And I said, well, why can't I? And I was actually probably going to kill him off at a hospital during an IoT event. But so Zach told me, do not kill off Peter. So Peter came back. He's now in Sharpie as a character. I even had my son do T-shirts for me on him. And it's an easy way to understand what's going on with cybersecurity, what you need to do as an entrepreneur, and then actually what it means as a regular person out there. So that's even up at Barnes & Nobles or up at the SAE website for like $40. This one's paperback versus the big, thick textbook one. So that's what I'm doing. I'd like to take really difficult subjects. I'd like to attack them, as Aaron knows. I'm sort of a bulldog when it comes to that. But in particular, to explain things simply to people, what does it mean? I mean, you have a cell phone. Most people say that's cool. Everything goes through the air. It's a little more complex than that. But you sometimes need to understand what's behind that. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you. Now, Aaron, back to you. When you wrote the Ed Research Report, this was in 2021, Airport Cybersecurity Standards and Regulation, you basically told us a lot of things in terms of, openings that, could be hackable, situations that were very concerning. Now in 2023, what do you see?
Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that we're making progress all the time. Not only our adversaries are making progress. The bad news is they don't have the restrictions we do. We have to do everything by the book. We have to keep to strict regulations and laws, which they don't, etc. But underneath everything, the basic perception now is that people and organizations are waking up. They're waking up because the idea that aviation, aerospace is immune from cybersecurity starts to crack down piece by piece, bit by bit. It started with the aircraft themselves, because aircraft need to comply with the strictest regulations for safety, hence cybersecurity for safety as well. But it now trickles down to the ground, to the airports, which are fuzzy creatures. And as you very well know, I always like to stick to, in each of my reports, to stick to one elephant example. And airports are very much like the fable of the 5 blind people trying to tell you what an elephant is just by touching it. And this is how we are today. But what makes me a bit more optimistic is that we start taking our cloth a bit off our eyes. A lot of people start doing it and seeing beyond the pure aircraft and airworthiness, the pure information systems, because you see the cyber-physical systems, the kind of systems Gloria and I deal with on G-32, struggle with, okay, still, on G-32, are not like the classic information systems and the perception, the popular perception, the one that you see in movies also, of cyber folks going for information, and the worst thing you can have is losing information or having your information exposed. With cyber-physical systems, the odds are much steeper. You may lose your life, you may lose your system, you may lose some very, very critical equipment, like an airplane, like a power station, like not just one car in the case of ground vehicles, but a whole lot of cars, a section of a highway worth of cars, or a parking lot worth of cars. So this is serious business now. It's not about information. It's not about information. And the closer the airport perception of having the Internet of Everything, as I called it, as an overarching perception, not just we have cyber physical systems, we have information systems, we have this, we have that, we have airports. It's like saying we have a city. In certain cases, it's like saying we have a small country, okay, in the complexity of it. And it's a huge miracle that we were not hit harder yet. And I hope it's not going to happen anytime soon. And I hope we advance fast enough with our regulations and methodologies so that it doesn't happen. Because every day we have a few small miracles, not so small actually. The stuff you read about in the newspapers, this airport was hacked, that airport was hacked, this airline, that airline. This is just the tip of the iceberg, because there are orders of magnitude more attempts to do that. And every day we have a few small miracles in the fact that it doesn't happen. It's like, to quote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, one of them at least, what's the best way to fly? Jump from a high place to the ground and don't hit the ground. So the good news is we haven't hit the ground yet. The bad news is that we don't know for how long it will last. And gravity keeps working. Our adversaries don't take a break. Let's put it this way. This is about the perception and the insights I got from my contributors. I always like to talk to contributors in Edge reports. This is my true added value.
So, Gloria, from your perspective, coming from the ground, at an airport, what are you seeing out there? What are the good things and the bad things?
I'm always fascinated every time I go into an airport, whether it's a large airport or a small airport, and the physical boundary, first of all. So if I'm driving a car and I've got to go either pick up somebody in arrivals or departures, or I go into a parking structure, or my favorite is when I go under a runway. That's like my super favorite one. So I'm always looking at those physical boundary structures to say, wow, what happens if something happened, right? What happens if something happens to my vehicle? What happens if there was an event that wasn't lovely in that space as I'm driving? So I always look at that. I'm always looking at fences. Fences always fascinate me. Where are they? Where are they compared to the runway as I'm driving up? And then, of course, as I'm looking at things on the tarmac, because I had gotten involved in some tarmac vehicles probably a decade or so ago, what happens as those vehicles pull up to a tarmac and support the planes? What do they do? Who's really driving them? How do they communicate? So those are the things. When you're looking out a window, I do this. You're sitting waiting for your airplane, and you're watching all the ground vehicles, because I'm into vehicles. So I'm watching all the ground vehicles and what they do and what they don't do. But then, of course, you're in an airport and there's other things that are going on. You've got garbage trucks that show up. Well, who's showing up in the garbage truck? Where are they going? I mean, there's all sorts of wonderful things that happen as a vehicle starts to touch an airport. And I'm not sure that, so I focus on the vehicle. But once you start looking at a microcosm, you're going to look at some more interesting combinations of how things communicate. So, and then there's going to be new technologies that happen. As I said, an autonomous vehicle coming in into the airport. How's that going to happen? How do they communicate? Am I going to have more autonomous vehicles sitting on the tarmac? You might. We've had discussions there, and I have had with other people. What happens when UAVs come into your airspace? What happens when you block out frequencies around the airport? What does that mean? I don't know if you notice, but if you get close to a government site, your directions disappear on your MapQuest. So, I mean, those are the things that I watch, as signals about what's going on. So that's how it all relates. Will it get more difficult? Yes. Will it get more complex? Yes. Will you have more vehicle to infrastructure stuff going on? Absolutely. And so you got to have those standards that are in place. What are those communication protocols, and how does it affect other things around it? So that's what I'm looking at, Monica. As I said, I'm waiting for an airplane. I'm looking at the tarmac, looking at the vehicles out there.
Thank you. So now I would like to talk about, to both of you, and then you can choose who is going to go first, about the G-32 committee, who they are, who's in it, what kind of work you've been doing. Go ahead. Oh, Gloria, go.
Aharon gave it to me. So I co-chair G-32 with Bill Schofield out of Boeing. We have an amazing leadership committee with depth across many industrial verticals. We've actually published our first standard for G-32, the overall standard. We have free, by the way, videos out there as to what happens with EV charging, in particular for a vehicle that we put out there so that you can see how to use SAE G-32. A little controversial, but I think standards can be like really boring to read. I mean, they're boring to write. They are boring to read. The discussion's always interesting. But, if you can start to have a video to say, how do I start to use this? I think that's useful. So we've put video 0 out there and 1 out there for EV charging. What happens when a vehicle pulls into an EV charger? What are all the things that it affects? All the way up to satellites and nuclear power plants and country infrastructure, et cetera, all the way down. So that was exciting because I promised DOE I would do that. And I'm happy because I got video 0 and 1 out. And I want to finish the rest of them up. The other thing that we've done is that, you've got experts in microchips. So we're really working on the hardware side. I mean, people source things. You've got a big goal to move chips back to the US. But which ones are they? How does that happen? There's another group working on that, not in this group, but they touch it. But what happens as you start to look at chips? And, that is like another deep dive, down the rabbit hole. We have software. Software is really interesting, whether it's between and different verticals do different things. So Aharon's leading up, co-chairing the software piece. Hard, lots more software hitting everything. And you got to find those people who do software, and ideally you vet them well. But, that's another discussion. So again, I meet with these people. They're thought leaders, from insurance to risk to hardware to software to water to aircraft engines to aircraft it just goes on and on. So we've got this amazing group of talent. I compliment Bill Schofield and Dan DeMasi and Aharon. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I will probably recruit you in. So I keep bringing people, and then I have Aharon actually, saying, "Is this guy okay?" And I go, "Yeah, he's pretty good." So we do that. So connect with me on LinkedIn because I will probably recruit you to keep going on SAE G-32. So that's the group. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. Yes. Aharon, just another quick question related to the G-32. It seems that you're dealing with very hard questions, very hard challenges.
Had it been easy, it would not have been interesting.
Well, you have to realize I love hard things. One, because I find it interesting. Exactly with Aharon. But you can't just say my thought process ends here. I'm more of a strategy person. So it's like, I've got this big problem. Cool. I like big problems. How do you solve it? And, engineers solve problems. They do. But they're political as well. So then you got to wrap things into it. I don't think the problems are difficult technically. Okay. I think they're solvable. I think it's more of a how do you deal with the rest of the economic political connection. I think the engineers could go solve the problems. I really do. but I'm an engineer. That's how I think. But the
But
political aspects are hard.
but
But
cybersecurity is, and this is something that we always tend to forget, all of us, is about people,
yes,
about adversaries trying to kill us, and our and friendlies trying to protect us. It's always about people. The engineering is there mostly. Sometimes we need to struggle with some engineering issues as well. This is why we're engineers, okay? And you know that my part of the committee, Gloria, is the blue collars. We stick our hands into the grease, okay? We actually deal with the nuts and bolts of the standards and the guidance, but it always starts and ends with people. Good people will produce good results. Bad people will produce bad results. And beyond that, the other, at the same level of importance, at places like G-32 that do interconnected activities, is the pervasiveness of everything. Air blends into the ground blends into the air. We are looking into in very few years into an age of eVTOLs. Is it a car? Is it an airplane? Is it both? We don't know. And in the same way that we have an EV, an electric vehicle, having discussions, potentially being hacked with its charging station, we might have, and we already have, UAVs having discussions with a ground station that's remotely, and that's the bread and butter of your discipline, Gloria. You are the antenna lady. I mean, if it goes into the air, you can hack it, okay? I have no doubt about it. So everything blends, air, ground, static and dynamic, and even we can see it even in the engineering sense. Okay, I was called in to give a hand to the software group, and we are now looking at a lot of more virtual or soft entities, not just software. How do you treat design? How do you treat data? It's all there. It's all related. There's a lot of gray. So cyber adversaries thrive in the shades. We should also get accustomed to these gray areas, to the non-deterministic entities, elements, whatever. And it's interesting. I mean, again, had it been easy, I would guess not very many of us would have been attracted to do this.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's fun. Totally. It's fun because it's complex, but because it's complex, I always want to move faster, and then the team gets a little upset with me because I want to move faster. But I do want to move faster, and you have to realize that standards are important. Okay, you have to know what you're going to design to. Why? Because you can do a bunch of different things to design, but you want to design what you want to design to, so you can test, so it works. Okay, so when people say, what's the standard? Well, there's going to be new standards developed. You're going to have to work to them. Ideally, you help create them so that your technology works seamlessly with those standards and execute.
Right. So just to wrap up, then we're going to see questions and answers. What keeps you guys awake at night?
You want to start first, Aaron? Oh, okay, I'll go first. So, I went
always ladies first.
Thanks. So I did a presentation, and I always like to see who the preppers are in the audience, right? But this was basically, sort of the missile system type people. And I said, what keeps you up at night? And, how many preppers are out there, that sort of thing. and they're like, well, you know what scares us is if we lose the complete West Coast. Well, that's a whole different way of looking at things. Okay, I don't worry about that. That's not really in my space. Okay, but with G-32 it is. But you know, I like my water. You know, I really like my electricity, and because it's a nice way to live. But also I like my goods that come in on trucks. So again, at COVID, you saw, you know, what happens when maybe trucks don't get through. Things happen. Well, you need the trucks. I like my stuff delivered to my door. I really love that. So I'd say I like water. I mean, air is good too. You know, water, air, electricity, my vehicles to be working, and in particular, my deliveries to my front door. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, let's put it this way, because I originate from aerospace and I still live mostly in the aerospace domain, what keeps me up at night is that in the analogy of falling from a high place and not hitting the ground, is that we will start hit the ground, because that we will be out of miracles. Something really, really nasty will happen, and it's a constant race. A lot of good people spend a lot of time. How would I say that? Lowering the ground so that we don't hit it. It's going to haunt us for the foreseeable future. I don't really see something like a magic wand that would solve it. So I would keep losing sleep over that, I guess, in the foreseeable future. And this is why I train and teach folks about the existing standards. We have no better than that. We don't have anything better than that today. So at least let's do this. Let's do what we have in hand. And not everyone does it, by the way. That's one of the things that we should diligently work at: education.
Yeah, and I'm going to add one thing. You know, I've been collecting software that can be put together. Really interesting software. It'd probably scare a lot of people, but you know, interesting software that can be put together as pieces that can come together seamlessly. That can actually help with cyber physical systems. So, but you've got to slowly work on merging them and getting these people to talk to each other. But it's coming together. It's
always people. It's always people. They need to want to do it. They need to know about it. It's always about people. And Monica, you know what my last 2023 model edge report was about? The fading humans. We're fading away from our machines, and this is inevitable on one hand, but we have to be very worried about that as well on the other hand.
So Matt, are there questions online that you can see?
Yeah, maybe from the audience.
Yeah, so the first one we've got for you is saying, could you please talk about some examples of the most challenging cybersecurity issues and how they're handled or fixed in our time?
Yeah. Aaron, you want to do that one as a snapshot of something?
A snapshot of something. Well, I would take it to the flip side. The most challenging cybersecurity issues, plural, at least in aviation or some other highly critical sectors like energy, huge energy complex systems, etc. The worst issue. The worst issues are theoretical issues because we keep doing the typical error of preparing to the previous wars. We don't properly look at what's ahead of us. So the worst issue is the one that didn't happen yet. Worse yet, the typical executive management would want you to look at, 2 days ago, I just saw someone posting on LinkedIn, something that we're struggling with on G-32 for years now. The typical executive leadership would tell you, what's the likelihood? What's the likelihood? And the only way to answer this question would be to go to the past. And the problem with it is that the past is behind us. We need to deal with the future. So the worst issue is the one that cannot be solved, because executive management would not allocate you the resources to do that, because it never happened yet. So the perception is that its likelihood is low because it didn't happen. This is the worst issue that I can think of, the one that didn't happen yet. Sorry, Gloria.
So actually, Aaron, can I ask you a follow-up to that? So what is an argument or arguments that one could give to executive management to make them see the need or urgency?
Likelihood is it does not include only 4 letters, but it's the equivalent of a 4-letter word. It should be banned in such discussions. Likelihood is for executive games. It's like a toy you have on your desk. You can enjoy it, but you're not allowed. You should not be allowed to use it in real life. It's a people's issue. It's always a human factor. Human factors cannot be allocated any statistics. They're not deterministic and they're not probabilistic. Period. If there's a will, there's a way, and only humans can have a will.
All right, Gloria, you wanna add anything to that?
Maybe something more concrete than I.
This is an old issue, but this is just sort of a practical issue, okay? Because it bugs me. You know how we usually charge our phones. Well, the FBI just issued another item that said, don't plug this in directly into any public charging system. Don't do that. But it's not an old issue. It's been kicking around for quite some time. But really getting the public to understand some issues that are going on that can affect them, that can go in lots of places, that's an issue. There's just some real basic cyber hygiene that could be put in place that can solve lots of issues. Even a lot of phishing emails that I get, those are my favorite. So there's just some basics. There's some block and tackle that can help at the low end. And then on the other end, like in Game of Thrones, I think they said chaos is a ladder. Chaos is fabulous. And so you have clever people who are your adversaries, and a little bit of chaos is wonderful.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. Chaos is, when in a reasonable dose, I think can certainly help things as well. All right, so Aaron, Gloria, thank you so much for giving us 45 minutes of your time today. It's very appreciated. I think that really did take a very nice look at some of the commonalities and the challenges that both ground vehicles and airports alike are having with cybersecurity. Gloria, you mentioned, I threw this in the chat at the very beginning, you mentioned sometimes the challenges that Colt can have. As a personal anecdote, I was in the New Orleans MSY airport during a freeze in Louisiana in January of 2018. Literally all of the bathrooms, all the plumbing did not work. So even if you're at your gate, you had to actually exit the airport, leave the terminal, go outside to a porta potty, then go back in through security to go to a bathroom. So I feel your pain.
Yeah, appreciate the basics,
Yeah, that really put things into perspective there. All right, everyone. So thank you so much for participating today. I want to let you all know that this recording will be live on our YouTube channel shortly. We'll also share it with all of you via email as well. So keep an eye out so you can revisit all of the information that was presented here by Gloria and Aaron. So thank you so much. This series will actually have a part 3 in 3 weeks on September 20th. So keep an eye out for another Edge Report webinar coming to all of you. So everyone, have a great rest of the day. We appreciate all of your participation, and let's hope that the week is off to a good start. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.